Welcome back. Tough day for Donald Trump yesterday. Michael Cohen testifying against him in New York City. They were both in the courtroom together, which was quite a sight to see, particularly after when they both spoke. Jenna Ellis then became the latest defendant to plead guilty in Georgia. The question now, does any of this make a difference in any of these cases?
Yeah, for more, let's welcome in former Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Sir, welcome. Let's start with Michael Cohen's testimony yesterday against Trump and taking the stand again today. So Trump discrediting Cohen on Truth Social, saying lie after lie and getting caught each time. What does Cohen's testimony mean for the case?
Yeah. Good morning. It's good to be with both of you. You know what it means? Michael Cohen is a convicted liar. Let's start with that. And so he has determined since he left the Trump organization to be, one of the chief critics of Donald Trump. And I think a lot of what Michael Cohen says has to be discounted and has to be, weighed against the actual truth. Now, that being said, I think it was very dramatic, and the media loved the fact that those two were in court together, and the cinematic drama that creates. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't change anything about the case in New York that's currently going on, and that is that the Attorney General campaigned to try to get Trump, and that's what we're watching, is the Attorney General's office trying to get Trump on anything they possibly can, including these civil fraud charges.
Yeah, let me ask you, I haven't heard this question asked very much, but here we are. It's almost November 1st. They're going to be voting in your home state, in Iowa, right, January 15th, and then New Hampshire right after that. And now we're seeing the situation where, let's say Trump wins in Iowa, and then he wins 10 days later in New Hampshire. And then in March, we've got Super Tuesday, South Carolina. This whole nominating process could be over before any of these cases, let alone the trials begin, let alone a verdict. Is that part of the calculus, you think, on behalf of the Trump defense team?
Based on my experience, especially in Iowa, a lot of people just don't care about these legal cases. At the end of the day, they're picking a president, and their job is to determine who could do the job the best. And I think the polls are showing very clearly that, at least in the early states, that Donald Trump is very popular, and that these things don't impact the support from a lot of folks. Now, that being said, this is the left's strategy. Since they can't beat him at the ballot box, they're going to try to beat him down with legal process. And it's really, it's a shame that this is what it has come to. But at the end of the day, based on what I know about Donald Trump and how I see him, he's going to fight through all these things like he does everything else.
Yeah, you wonder if the strategy works, right? Because every time, a case was brought against him, his poll numbers go up. Sir, Attorney Jenna Ellis became the fourth defendant to strike a deal in the 2020 election case in Fulton County, Georgia, pleading guilty. Take a listen.
In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges.
How bad is this for former President Trump?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is what they're going to say, in these plea agreements, because it's very clear that the DA down in Fulton County overcharged many of these defendants to try to pressure them to plead to misdemeanor charges. They none of them are getting any jail time. They're all getting probation and community service. So that demonstrates the lack of a serious charge that they pled to. But obviously, each of these people are going to have something to say, and whether it's true or not, we'll have to let the evidence support that or not support that. But it is very clear the strategy was to get as many people as possible to plead to light charges in the hopes that they will say something bad about Donald Trump ultimately when his case goes to trial.
What do you make of the Mark Meadows situation? Former White House chief of staff granted immunity in the January 6th case. We heard some reporting this morning that maybe that's not the case, but either way, it does look like he's going to play ball with the prosecution here.
Yeah, so I read a lot about that case this morning. Obviously, it was in the news and was, top of the page. But, some of these leaks, they're hard to decipher, whether or not he got immunity, whether or not, he has already appeared and cooperated with Jack Smith's investigation. But all that being said, based on Mark Meadows' book and what he says in the book, I can't imagine without perjuring himself that he's going to say much different than that the election involved cheating and other shenanigans that many people believe happened in the 2020 election.
All right, we'll watch it play out. Continue to follow that. Mr. Attorney General, great to have you back on. Thank you.
All right, good to see you.
You too. Matthew Whitaker joining us this morning.